Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Great Handyman's Home Remodeling Videos. In this episode, we're going to be tackling a new bathroom. It's actually an antique bathroom. It has Aqua toilet and an Aqua sink. No tub, no shower, just a small bathroom. But we're having serious problems in this bathroom. The floor is sinking down, so we're going to have to remove all of the tile and all the floor right down to the joists and start over with fresh plywood. But before we do that, we're going to need materials. That's why we're driving up now to Home Depot. It can really be a convenient thing. My customer came here over the weekend, picked out her tile, her vanity, her toilet, and some other things that, is just a customer's choice. So she paid for everything, and now I'm here to pick it up. Okay, the items that she wasn't able to pick up was the toilet and the pedestal sink. We're on our way back to the customer's address, where we'll unload and we'll start tearing up that bathroom and turning it into something really nice. All the personal effects have been taken out of here, and you can see all that's left is the colored toilet and sink. And this floor down here, like I was telling you, when I step on it, not only does it sag down, but it's squeaking. We also have radiator heat in this bathroom. We're going to take this all apart and spray paint it white. The walls are going to become cream colored, and so is the ceiling. We'll get new light fixtures, new mirror, a new pedestal sink, a new toilet, a new floor, new trim, new outlets, everything new. But we have a little ways to go. This is just day one. Okay, I got all the trim tore off the window, and I've mudded because it was all chewed up. So we'll have to let that dry and come back and sand it. But all these walls were smooth anyway, so we're going to come back and texture them with an orange peel type texture. I got new light switch, a new outlet, and I've only tore out the tile to this far. The toilet's ready to go, but tomorrow's garbage day, so I'm just going to wait till then. This stuff can do wonders. This is appliance epoxy spray paint. Boy, I can use it for a lot of purposes. I've used it for handrails, I've refurbished bathtubs with it, I've refurbished shower pans with it, and right now I'm refurbishing this radiator heater. All the rest of the parts are outside and they've been spray painted, but that one's trapped behind there, so I had to spray it in place. You got to be really careful with this stuff. It stinks, and it takes almost 24 hours for it to dry. But when you're done, it's going to look just like the paint on a refrigerator, like it's pictured here. And now that it's dry, I think you can see how shiny it is. And it's just going to stay that way. That epoxy paint is just wonderful stuff. Everywhere the tile was, I ripped out the sheetrock for a couple of reasons. It was really peely and paper tears, and it was going to be difficult to try and mud it smooth. And sheetrock is only $8, so it was just a lot easier and cheaper to just cut it out and to replace it. And before I replace it, if you notice all this lumber back here, that's going to be used to attach the two bolts for the pedestal sink. I want to make sure of the height. So I'm going to go outside now and I want to measure my pedestal and my sink and where the holes land and come back in here and get an idea, because right down here the old sink cracked this 2x12, but there's still a lot of grip in this lumber, so I'm going to see if I can't just leave it alone and reuse it. We are going to have to change all the valves, the toilet valve and the sink valves, turn off the water, strip all those valves off, punch small holes in the sheetrock, get the sheetrock on and screw it in place. And then I bought some 20-minute mud. I want to mix up some fast drying mud and mud this area, so after lunch I can come back and sand it and go ahead and texture it. because the water's going to have to stay off until this is all finished right here and I'm able to put the valves back on. Alright, so I got all the sheetrock replaced. Now I'm getting ready to tape and mud everything. These screw holes and the cracks. And I got all the valves taken off and the water's off to the house. And those are just going to have to sit like that until I get this thing textured. And now we're in dry mode. It's got completely sheetrocked where I can texture it. But first that needs to dry. So we're going to go to lunch and take our time. And when we come back, we should be able to stand and start texturing. So I've allowed some time for this to dry. And I've just remudded it so it can dry again. And the next time we come in here, we'll be ready to texture. And I went ahead and they put a border up top with wallpaper. I peeled that all off and I've mudded it so it can dry as well. I would love to be able to spray texture this wall before putting the faucets on. Unfortunately, they're going to need water tonight, so we have to put these on ahead of time. And about the only thing I can think of to do is to tape these up when I go to texture so they don't get sprayed. But you can see how nice that looks with a brand new chrome ring on it. And now I'm about to put a new valve on. Now that this valve is installed, I do have a little room right here to pull my ring forward, so I can put blue tape all over this ring before I texture the walls and then take the tape off, and that'll keep my faucet nice and clean. We have 2 valves to put on here and of course the P-trap. And there we go. 2 new valves installed. Now that everything's dry, we need to start sanding. We're going to start off with this coarse sandpaper block that will knock down any high ridges, and then we're going to use the medium sanding block to ghost out all the edges. You can probably see here on camera how the sheetrock mud leaves an edge, and if you can see a line, texture is not going to cover up imperfections like that. You gotta have a nice smooth finish to still texture. So let me give you an idea. Now that's just one little area, but you see right here how I had the sheetrock mud kind of ghost out. There's not a definite line there. Now texture will cover that. Then after a little sanding and light remudding, this will dry in no time and I'll be able to go ahead and texture these walls today. In the meantime, I'm going to clean up this windowsill and paint everything white. It's going to get painted white right here because I'm going to be masking this over with plastic and tape so I don't texture the window. I also need to paint the trim that goes around the door right here. Paint it white. Put our first coat of white paint on the windows and on the trim. We've resanded our mud and we're just about ready to start texturing. Before we do, we need to mask anything that we don't want to get texture on, such as these valves. And even the threads on here, you don't want to fill up with a bunch of mud. I want to keep those nice and clean, so we'll wrap that as well. And there we go, all wrapped up, ready for spray texture. Alright, I got the first coat on here, and I've actually put a second coat right along the front edge. And after lunch, I'll be able to tape all the way down here, mask all of this window, and then I'll be able to texture. The other place I need to tape is over here on the casing. This only has one coat on it, so we need to get another coat on it now, let it dry, and then after lunch we can tape it up. And I'm going to want a barrier here anyway. The door is gone, so I'm going to hang a large plastic sheet right here. That's going to keep the texture inside this bathroom. So we're going to get another coat of paint on this, go to lunch, and we'll continue. We're getting closer and closer to texturing time. I've gone ahead and I've masked up this window so we don't get any texture on the frame or the glass. I'm about to take this light fixture down, and also along the frame here I've put 2 layers of tape, and then I'll drape a piece of plastic there, trapping myself in here with the hopper and the hose. But that's what I got to get ready next. So this is the back of my truck, and I've got a compressor, and I got a regulator gauge, and it's pushed up to about 70 psi. Comes up here to my 100-foot reel, and I've got it stretched out and going in the house to my hopper. This is my hopper. It's gravity fed, so when I hook up the hose down here, it's just going to start blowing air out the tip. And then when I pull the trigger, it's going to allow product to fall down into here and be spattered out. This can regulate how much is falling, and the size of your tip at the end, you can regulate how much is coming out. This particular tip is what is called for orange peel. There's a larger tip for a knockdown. And the mud that we put in this thing has got to be fresh without any chips, and we need to mix it up a lot thinner than it comes. So let's get this opened. So I've added water to this, and now I'm going to mix it. Be careful. Alright, I want to show you the consistency. I mean, it's got to be drippy and not really peak or anything like that. It's got to be real thin and to go in that hopper, and then for it to gravity feed itself down into the airstream. So that's how we mix it up. So you can see when this thing's hooked up, it starts blowing air out the tip constantly. And when you pull the trigger, it allows product to fall down into here and then spattered on the wall. Okay, I'm going to balance this while I pour in my product. It's heavy, so hang on to it tight. Don't let it fall over. It will make a mess. Plug my air in. And once the air starts, you won't be able to hear me talk. And I'm going to change the angle of the camera to show you how this goes on. This is what it looks like after the texture has been put on. It just scattered in random spatters. And now that I've got the light back on, I can see whether or not I've got good coverage, and I think I do. I think it turned out real well. So I've taken off all the plastic, and I've left the blue tape on the door because that trim is white. Well, the rest of this is going to be cream colored. And you can see I've already started doing painting here to this nice cream color that she picked out. So we'll get a coat of paint on this, and we'll show you what it looks like in a little bit. So the painting continues, and I think it's going to turn out real nice. Nice cream colored. Everything trimmed in white. I've still kept my blue tape on my radiator and my door. This is only the first coat, and it's going to need another, so I want to protect everything. And of course, I'm also going to be doing the ceiling the same color. Now we have the whole thing painted. The ceiling, the walls, everything. We're going to let this dry, and we'll come back in a little bit and continue. And all this time, you all been wondering why I haven't started the floor. Well, it was because I had so much work on the walls. I had tile to tear out, and I had sheetrock to replace, faucets to put on, and then I had to texture it and then paint. So now that all that sloppy work is done, and I'm done dripping paint, and I'm done dripping mud and sawdust and sanding from sheetrock mud and just everything, now when I come back and these walls are dry, I'll be able to tear this out. And if there's touch up along the walls, then I'll do that at the end. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Great Handyman's Home Remodeling Videos. This is the Aqua Bath Remodel, Part 3. Today we're going to tear up that floor and get it all the way down to the joists. Well, at least around the toilet area we're going to go down to the joists. I believe what's happened in this bathroom is someone put particle board down on top of the plywood and then used tile and mesh, and it's a mess. It's leaked all around the toilet and has caused everything to sag, so it's all got to go. Let's go inside and take a look. So it's just what I suspected. This is a particle board. This is not to be used on a floor, but somebody installed it over the top of this plywood, and it just doesn't work. It falls apart. So we're going to get this all tore up. See, this is just turning into sawdust. Moisture has gotten underneath it and just turned it into sawdust. That's what particle board is made out of, is sawdust. You can't do this. And the reason it was squeaking, it's not even attached. It's just laying here. If there were nails, I mean there weren't many. There was no glue. Thank goodness, because I'm trying to tear it up, and the less holding it, the better. Phew! Get one chunk of that wire mesh out of the way. This is particle board. And look at this. Here's the old linoleum that was on top of it. So it was particle board, then linoleum, then mesh, and then tile. You can't do it that way. Well, you can, but This is the result. A floor that has to be tore up. Okay, so it turns out that it's a lot easier to pull up this wire mesh with the tile still attached, just ripping it all up and then chipping up the particle board. So I'll show you how that's coming along. So if I can get under this mesh, I should be able to pull this all up. Okay. And further inspection shows they only stapled this mesh down. And when you do mesh with tile, you always screw or nail it down. Staples, that's why it failed. So we're going to tear it all out and do it the right way. And just look how many nails they used to attach this. 3 way up here. Oh, then nothing. Oh, wait a minute. Down here at the edge. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, they did the edge. That's it. You can't do floors that way. Okay. The area all around this toilet is wet and soft, so we've got to remove it. Now, I've been to the basement and I found out the joists are running in this direction, and I think there's a joist right there next to this. So, in my piece of plywood, I'm going to want it to hit more than one joist, just for stability so it doesn't teeter-totter. So, back here in the corner, I probably won't be able to reach the next joist. I think the wall is on top of it, but the one out here is going to exist. So I want to cut, because I have pieces of plywood here that are 2 foot by 4 foot. I want to cut 2 foot wide and 4 foot long right here. So I'm going to measure. Yeah, because I can see if there's a joist there, there's another joist right here. And I won't be able to cut right up next to the edge, but out here just a little ways. And according to my tape measure, it's about 3 inches. So I want to add 3 inches to the end of 48. So I'm going to mark it at 51. And whenever I make a mark on the wood, for example, if I was to mark it here, I always circle it. It makes it a lot easier to find it later, rather than just a little tiny mark. So let's see. "24 inches. So if I cut it at 6, add 24, that's 30. I'm still in my wet area. So I can shift over about an inch, 7 to 31, 7 to 31. And do the same thing back here in a dry spot, 31 and 7. Did say about 3 inches away from the wood. 3 inches. Okay, there is hardly any nails or screws or anything in this plywood holding it down. And what I am finding, I'm finding staples and little nails. So I'm going to come through, I'm going to go cut a 2x4 and mount it underneath. It's going to run the entire length of right here to help support this side. And the same thing over here on this corner. I'm going to run a 2x4 underneath here. And then that'll give me support right along this edge. Then these 2x4s. See, and also I want to cut a circle in this plywood. The trouble is I don't want to cut it this size. I want it to go underneath. So the only way to really do this the right way is to cut this piece of plywood long ways. In other words, there'll be a cut right down the middle this way. So half of my circle can scoop underneath this way, and half scoop underneath this way. I'll show you what I'm talking about when I get it cut. So I took a 2x4, cut it in half, so I have 2 4-foot pieces here. Now I'm going to hold them up underneath the floor and attach them. One thing that might help you is if you draw an approximate line right down the middle of the 2x4. Then when you hold it up down here, you know approximately where it needs to go for you to hit half of it. Alright, now we're ready for our plywood. I'll go cut it to fit and then rip it in half, cut my circle, and we'll slide it underneath, and then we'll use these other holes right here to attach it to the plywood. That'll secure it. So I got me a piece of plywood here, and it's 4 foot. I've cut the hole at 3 foot. So let me mark and cut this off, and we'll be ready to install. Okay, I've got liquid nails on my 2x, and I've cut out a corner of the piece that I'm putting in, so I could cut half a circle on this piece, and I cut half a circle in the other piece that's coming in just a second. So similarly to these 2x4s, just some place for the plywood to catch, this is the leftover piece, and there's nothing wrong with it, so I'm going to use it right here underneath as a joining plate. So hopefully you can tell on camera this is level with the floor, this is underneath coming up. Is the other piece. And like I said, I already have liquid nails spread on this. Yeah, that's going to work out just fine. So I got that piece of plywood inserted where it was all watered and chipped out and broken and weak. And then on top of that, we're going to go over the entire floor with 3/4 inch plywood. That's going to bring it right up to the bottom of the ring. And then with a 1/4 inch underlayment, that should bring it up right to the ring, where that's perfect for setting the toilet. So you can see what we got down so far and how far we have to go. Well, I have 2 more of these sheets. They're 2x4 pieces of plywood, and that should be plenty to fit right in there and then here by the door. Then we're going to cover the whole thing in underlayment and let that dry, and in the morning we'll start tiling. Also, if you've been noticing, I haven't been real pleased with how the sheetrock turned out. And I know it means getting out the hopper again and retexturing it, but it also means a happy customer. So if you have an area that didn't quite come out right, tear it out and do it over. And finally, after a little bit of cutting, we got all the pieces fit in. A bunch of liquid nails underneath it and a bunch of screws to hold it in place. Now we're going to let that dry for a while, then we'll come back and we'll put 1/4 inch underlayment on top of it. Then we'll start tiling. All of the hardy board has been installed, and now we're dry fitting tiles. We're starting at the back of the bathroom, and we're just laying those dry all the way to the front door, where you can see it's too long, it goes into the next room. So I look at it and measure carefully, and I come up with 7 1/8. So if I cut some tiles 7 1/8 and do a row back here 7 1/8, when I put the rest of these tiles in, it'll come out even right to the carpet, and I'll have a factory edge right next to the carpet. And there shouldn't be a need for a threshold strip. So measuring carefully off the wall 7 3/16, I made a little tiny mark with my pencil, and then I did the same thing down here, and that's a 1/16 bigger than this is wide. That's going to give me just a little tiny gap back there, enough for play to get these front edges lined up. Then once those are set just a little bit, we'll be able to continue forward, and it'll come out even right at the door. The next row is going to be offset, so I've marked right here in the middle where dead center is, and I've also marked my floor with a pencil line showing exactly where I'm going to be mortaring right now. Then I mud a small area, just enough for a tile, mud one tile, the one that I had marked dead center, and I'm going to flip it over and gently place it, center it up, and plop. The plop is important, that you plop the tiles down. It poofs all the air that's underneath out. Then moving the tile, shifting it back and forth, also helps the mortar to even itself out. Well, that's what one box will do. On to box number 2. And in no time, it'll all be tiled. It only took 2 boxes. I saved all my cuts and I was able to utilize the leftovers later. So that first row way back there is 7 1/8 inches. If you remember, I laid it out to the front, and now the front has a full tile without a cut edge, so it's nice and friendly right here, and we can get away without putting in a transition strip. You'll be able to just step right over into it. But we're going to let this dry, and we'll come back and grout it, and then trim, then set the toilet, set the sink, do the toilet paper holder, not the light, not the mirror, not the... Welcome back. This is part 4 of the Aqua restroom remodel. We're getting ready to retexture just a little bit in these areas so it can dry, so I can come back and paint it. And it doesn't need much, but it is going to make a little mess, so I've gone ahead and I've covered up both my faucets and everything right here with a piece of paper, and the one down there for the toilet. I've also covered up the tile and taped it down real good, because when you're texturing, air blows everywhere. So if you don't tape things down, it would just fly all over the place. So I want to go get my texture gun and fill it up and texture these mistakes that I made. Oh, I just finished texturing, retexturing. So while that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and come over here to this window and give it another coat of white paint, and that can dry. And then I'll grout the floor, and that can dry. Okay, now the window has been coated again with white, so that's why it's a little bit shiny. It's drying now. I also put a second coat, or actually a third coat, on the trim right here. There was a couple spots that didn't look quite right, so I went ahead and painted around there as well. Now it's time to grout this floor. I'm going to get all this newspaper up out of the way, mix up some grout, and we'll continue. With a clean sponge, I came through and I've scrubbed clean my floor, and so it's wet. And while it's drying, I'm going to go out with a fresh bucket and get some grout and get it mixed up. Okay, and the grouting begins. Now, I don't have to be too concerned about the outer edge. Trim's going to come right here and cover this all up. So you really don't need to waste your time with up to the edge. Now, I need to get it right here, which inadvertently is going to get in the edge, but I'm not going to concentrate at all on the edge, just the inner parts. Now when I hit these grout lines at an angle, I don't want to hit it straight because my float would fall in the crack and make a dent. So always come across at an angle. grout is cement. It just has colorant in it, which gives it this color. So I filled in all around my toilet ring here, and it's on a slight angle going towards the middle. So when I put the wax ring on, it should set right on top of that grout in this metal flange and make a good seal. I'm keeping an eye on my grout lines that I already did to make sure that they're not sinking in, which would mean I didn't push enough product down inside. That's why it's very important to keep going over and going over and going over, because you're pushing the grout down deep, and it goes down deep and spreads out underneath the tile just a little bit. It locks everything together. Okay. You just do a little area. Some people like to do the whole floor and let it dry completely, then come back and scrub it. I just think that's silly. Not when you can come back with a... See, my sponge is extremely wet, and I'm scrubbing very lightly the grout, liquefying the top layer again, because the bottom layer is starting to set up as we speak. Of course, when you grout, sponging is critical. You have to wring it out really well. Wipe once, flip it over, wipe again, and then it's time to wring it out again. You can't keep using it unless you wring it out. It'll just keep streaking everything. And in no time, that little area is completely ready, and it can sit there and dry for several hours. Meantime, I'm going to continue the rest of this grouting. Alright, we'll continue right over here. Grouting does not take long. It's getting all the work done up to the grouting that takes long. I sure think this looks better than that old white floor that was in here. Okay, once again, just a small area. Take my sponge that's extremely wet. I didn't wring it out hardly at all. And just scrub very lightly. Once again, that liquefies the top layer. Rinse it out really well. And then one side at a time. should clean right up. Now, there might be just a little bit of grout that's remaining on top of the tile. And you'll know as it dries because it'll start hazing up. And if it does that, it's okay. When it dries completely, you just come in and with a wet sponge or a wet rag, you buff it off and it'll come right off. It's like chalk. Because grout just won't stick to the surface of this. It'll only stick to the edge of the tile where it's not been glazed. Here we go. That's about a third of it. Alright, just to show you once again a close-up of how this is going in. Okay, here's another close-up of the grouting technique. I thought maybe you can't quite see it good enough that you might want it a little closer, so here we go, just a little bit closer. Let me get this right there, and then I'll bring in my sponge. Okay, once again, wring out your sponge just a little bit. I mean, it's pretty wet. And we're going to scrub lightly the entire area that we just grouted. Rinse out our sponge really well. You can probably see that streak right there. That's okay. I mean, I got most of it up. I can come back, no problem. Bring out my sponge again, nice and tight. Come back, nice and light. And there goes that grout line. So I started in the furthest corner away from the door. I'm working my way out. Pretty much the same way that I laid the tiles. Someone asked me, why didn't you start at the door if that's where you wanted your full tile? Well, if I started at the door, I could have done it that way. If I started at the door, I would have been more apt to have to put my weight on some of the tiles the further in I went. And I wasn't interested in doing any of that. And it's just as easy to dry lay them, measure them out, make sure everything's square, and then install, like I showed you in part 3, that 7 1/8 row in the back, so it would come up even up front. Just like that. So the grout's had time to dry, and I've already had and cut up trim and got it installed. Got the toilet paper holder installed. Got a water line ready for the toilet, and I'm getting ready to put in the sink now. I also reassembled my radiator down here and put my window completely back together and trimmed it out, caulked it and painted it, and got my new light fixture up. I think it looks pretty nice. It's really amazing how messy the bathroom remodel is. And then all of a sudden, at the end, everything just starts coming together. And it doesn't take long at all, and everything is installed, up and working. It's a good feeling. Got the window completely trimmed out and painted. This window originally had mullions running, you know, this way and this way. But they were broken and old, and so I just removed them, and it revealed a nice clear glass. And of course we got the door reinstalled. And that radiator looks brand new. Remember when it was green? So it really doesn't take that long, and before you know it, everything's put together. I want to thank you for watching Great Handyman's home remodeling videos. I really do appreciate you watching. As I give you one final tour of this bathroom, this is Great Handyman saying thanks for watching Great Handyman's home remodeling videos. We'll talk to you real soon.